Thank you, Chair. And Melina, Rachel and Georgina Meredith, thank you very much for taking the time here to appear before the committee and for sharing your stories with us. You've spoken very positively about your experience growing up as a child of surrogacy, while also voicing challenges associated with it. I'm glad that the experiences were very positive for you, and I know many others would have maybe serious issues with identity following donor conception. I'm not too sure, but are you familiar with a lady called Sarah Dingle? She would have been an Australian woman who is a donor-conceived person, and she would have addressed the UN in 2019 regarding surrogacy. She really, basically said that there is no right to have a child under international law, and that children are not goods or services that any state or business can provide. Dingle, alongside other persons born via surrogacy, have spoken on the commodification, being conceived to meet the needs of others, about half their identity being missing, and the exploitation of gamete donors and women who act as surrogates. They spoke of decades of profiteering in a global trade of sperm, eggs and embryos and wombs. If you could say anything or something to those women and men, what would it be? And do you think that we should be hearing from a range of different voices and experiences with surrogacy here in this committee? Thank you.
I'm very happy to answer that. So if that's okay with Meredith and Rachel. I am aware of Sarah Dingle. I spoke alongside Sarah and a variety of other donor-conceived individuals at the United Nations. And from a personal perspective, I found that experience really eye-opening. I was the only person on that panel born through surrogacy, and I do want to make that really clear. I think that donor conception and surrogacy have very, very different issues. And whilst they are closely related, we cannot treat them as the same thing because they are simply not. Some surrogate-born children are conceived through donors, granted, but on the whole, surrogacy is a separate entity. I was also eye-opened in this event in the United Nations by the stories of those who spoke alongside me who were donor-conceived, because I'd never really spoken to people who had had such difficulties with their origins, and it was it really broadened my experiences of interacting with different people who'd had a very different experience to the experience we've all had. And it was very clear in that interaction with them that they do feel intense hurt and pain and betrayment sometimes from the way they've been conceived, and at no point do any of us, I'm sure, want to undermine their feelings of that. But that is not necessarily reflective of how people feel in surrogacy. And I think, as I said earlier, that surrogacy generally is much more open, and a lot of the issues that I came across within that community speaking at the United Nations were about not having the access to information, not being told about their origins, not being able to get in touch with birth parents should they wish to, and feeling commodified because of the way that sperm donation was done in various countries. Again, not in the UK, so we have to bear in mind these were different countries with different rules. In terms of profiteering, I don't personally feel that surrogacy is really about profiteering. Clearly, altruistic and domestic surrogacy are altruistic and commercial surrogacy, have different issues, but in terms of international surrogacy, that can still be altruistic. And for me, in altruistic agreements, there is not profiteering because it's a woman somewhere on this planet wanting to help build another family. And what's allowed in the UK law is about reasonable expenses, which is absolutely right that surrogates should be supported and provided with, reasonable expenses and shouldn't bear any cost on the pregnancy and should be looked after by all parties. But I don't personally perceive that as profiteering. I think we have to take some of the comments that were publicised from the United Nations talks into look at them in detail, in that all I can say is that the comments which are made and publicised with donor-conceived and surrogacy people, the panel consisted of around 10 to 15 donor-conceived individuals who'd had very, very difficult experiences, and me born through surrogacy. So I'm not saying our experiences represent everybody, but I'm just saying that the comments that were made there don't necessarily represent surrogacy, because they mainly represent the views of those donor-conceived, and I happen to be there, and therefore they were put in the media as donor-conceived and surrogacy. So I just wanted to put that out to the court. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just clarify something? So Sarah Dingle is not born, she's not a child born from surrogacy, that's correct?
No.
Donor conceived.
No, Georgina, she isn't a child born from surrogacy. Okay.
No, she's donor-conceived.
Donor conceived.
Okay, thank you. So if Rachel and Meredith, if you want to come in on that, I will just say, just in relation to the issues with the voices on the committee, the committee we've worked together to ensure that we have a wide range of voices incorporated, and their, I suppose, discussions and decisions of the committee. So I wouldn't expect you to have any, I suppose, comments really on that, but certainly in relation to the comments from Sarah Dingle, that would be interesting.
I think for me, just
Meredith,
to add
if you want to come in, yeah.
what Georgina's already said so very eloquently, as always, that in relation to surrogacy, certainly through COTS, which was the organisation that facilitated my birth, it is not meant to be for profit. And any surrogate mother or any surrogate that said, oh, I'm doing this for the money, nobody would want to be involved with that. For me, that would be pretty unethical. It's the want to help a couple who've been struggling to have children. That's why they want to do it. And they probably enjoy pregnancy, and yeah, it's a very, very selfless act. And I think, as far as it from surrogacy being a profitable thing, that wasn't meant to be the case, and I don't think it should be at all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Rachel, did you want to come in?
Yeah, just to echo Meredith and Georgina, really, like my birth mother said, like, it's never for profit, and I have certainly never ever felt like a commodity or something materialistic. She said, so I've got 4 half siblings. She loves her family so much. The thought of somebody out there who desperately wants a child and cannot have a child just broke her heart. And if she could, let somebody experience that love of a family, then she said she would have happily done it again. And it's never been for profit. I also agree what Georgina said, donor versus surrogacy have to be compared it's two very different things. I suppose the only thing which is slightly different for me is the question of identity. Because I was so late finding it, I am maybe opposite to Georgina and Meredith. I look like my mum. I definitely look like my dad, but there was never any sort of, nobody ever guessed. The only thing that was probably in the favour is the fact that my mum was 50 when I was born. So when I did find out 3 years ago, it was a bit like, whoa, what? It was mind-blowing, because I never had any clue whatsoever, because I do look so much like my mum. But I wouldn't ever say that there was any damage or anything, but it was a bit of confusion, maybe briefly. But in the 3 years since it's happened, I'm completely happy with my identity and who I am and where I fit into this world. Maybe just a quick comment on birth certificates as well, whilst I have the floor. My birth mother's name is on my birth certificate, and I think that's something that does hurt me. That's the one thing, and I completely agree that it should be my parents, because they have earned the title of mum and dad. They have raised me. They are my parents. That's not dismissing my birth mother at all, but they are my parents and they should be on my birth certificate. But I agree that there should be some sort of link or database for complicated legal reasons or medical reasons, and also not to dismiss the selfless act that this birth mother has done, but she's not my mother. And I think I feel that's very important to mention.